Hi, welcome to IEP Breakdown. My name is Flossie Rosser, and I created IEP Breakdown as a way to help parents understand all of the different components of the IEP process and how they build upon each other to create a comprehensive annual IEP for their child. So today we're going to walk through the beginning steps of the IEP process and introduce IEP Breakdown and talk a little bit about what IEPs are and why they're important for your child. So let's get started with our IEP Breakdown overview. So at the ARC Northern Chesapeake region, our mission is to empower people with differing abilities to live, work, and thrive in their communities. Our vision is a world where people with differing abilities lead valued lives. Within Family Support Services, we work to provide opportunities to educate families and individuals so that they have the knowledge to effectively advocate and fully participate in their best chosen lives. While all individuals are different, they all have similar needs. FSS is designed to support families as needed from birth through the end of life over the arc of a lifetime. Our programs are designed to be flexible and based on the family or individual's needs, and they are open to all members of our community. So what does FSS offer? We offer education and training, customized resources and referrals based on the unique needs of each individual. We provide advocacy information, future planning, financial planning, navigating the education system, workshops and trainings on relevant topics provided by experts in subject matter, and problem solving. We also encourage parent connections, assistance in local funding sources, government and local resources, local events, recreational opportunities, respite care, and social events. Within educational advocacy, we teach classes and workshops about educational advocacy throughout the year. Some examples of the classes that we have taught in the past year include Getting Started, which is about IEP basics, Transitioning Youth, Charting the Life Course or Future Planning, and IEP Breakdown. When we teach our classes, we often encourage the Vegas rule. So the Vegas rule is what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and what happens in our classes, we try to keep within our classes. This we do to encourage parents to be open to sharing their personal stories so that we can provide the best guidance and resources through a group setting. But we need to make sure that all members of that group can respect our Vegas rule so that people feel safe to be able to open and share. When it comes to educational advocacy, knowledge is power. The more you know, the more successful you will be at facilitating outcomes for your child at an IEP meeting. The goal is not to dominate the meeting, but instead to balance the scale so that you are recognized as an equal member of the IEP team. So understanding the IEP process is critical. You must understand the process to effectively advocate. It is important to understand what you are asking of your IEP team. So you need to know the who, what, when, where, and why. Who will be doing the work, what will be done, when and how often it will be done, where it will be done, and why should they agree to do this. So a question I'm often asked is, why does it seem so hard to get my child services? And my response is that federal and state laws are technical documents which can be interpreted in several different ways. Schools, parents, and advocates may not always agree on how to interpret the laws, which contributes to conflict and misunderstanding about expectations. Okay, so at this point, what we're going to do is take a minute and talk about the IEP process and the IEP so that everyone has a broader understanding of what goes into creating an IEP. The IEP breakdown process was designed to assist parents and advocates in understanding the process of building an IEP. including becoming familiar with the various sections of the IEP, which build upon one another to create a contract which identifies and outlines accommodations, services, and goals to be provided through a specified school placement. Basically, the IEP is a map or an organized, individualized education plan, and it has two main purposes: to set reasonable learning goals for a child or youth, and to state the services that the school system or district will provide and how they will provide that service. It's designed to meet the unique educational needs of each child. Not all children are eligible for IEPs, so they must be identified as having a specified disability and a need for specialized instruction. Children in pre-K through age 21 may be eligible for an IEP. There are benefits to having an IEP. The IEP process begins with a comprehensive evaluation which outlines the child's strengths and challenges. The IEP, which is an individualized education plan process, is designed to ensure that parents and school staff are equal members of the IEP team. Through the IEP, the child may receive accommodations, related services, assistive technology, and behavior plans. Overall, the goal of the IEP process is to provide additional support to the child or youth to promote learning, to have realistic annual goals and objectives to guide the child's educational process. And each year's IEP should serve as a building block or a roadmap so that the child will have their best opportunity to be successful when exiting the school system. The goal is that they can be career ready, college ready, ready for military or technical training. The goal is that they are most ready to exit school prepared academically for further education, functionally with independent living skills, and related to job skills, they are either ready for employment or further employment services. Whatever their specific goals are, the IEP should be designed so that they can reach their highest trajectory. Okay, to get started with our IEP breakdown process, I'm going to run through the various tools that you'll need to gather. And what I encourage each family to do is put together their own IEP breakdown binder. So if you can gather a 3-ring binder, I'm going to run through the various tools that you'll need to include in your binder. So the first thing that you'll need is your IEP breakdown tool. And we have it available for you on the website. And this is the front sheet of what it will look like. So once you start working with this tool, you will see it lines up perfectly with your IEP, with your child's IEP. And I just want to point out at the end of the IEP, get down there are action plans for you. And the reason these action plans are important is as you go through the IEP process, you will come up with things that you would like to have changed in your child's IEP, or you come up with ideas of activities that need to occur outside of the school setting, both of which are important, but we're going to create your action plan. So in section 7, here's your action plan. And this is where you would record all of the items that you would like to request at an IEP meeting. So you can actually take this tool to your IEP meeting with you after you've completed the IEP breakdown process. You would have a list of outcomes that you would like to facilitate at your next meeting. And then you can bring this handy tool to the IEP meeting with you and advocate for your child, and then document whether it was accepted or rejected, when it would be implemented, who would be responsible, and the date that that action is completed. So this is your IEP action plan. And then the next page is an outside of school action plan. So This is helpful because sometimes as you go through the educational process, and especially if you have transitioning youth, you may come up with several activities that need to occur outside of school, but that may continue to support your child while they are in school. So for example, if a child is a transitioning youth and they are 14 and above, they would be eligible for DOORS services, which is the Department of Rehabilitative Services. They would be eligible for their PREETS summer programs. So PREETS summer programs are opportunities for children to get work experience in a supervised setting so they can gain some skills and gain a broader understanding of what it is like to have employment once they exit the school system. So applying for DOORS would be something that does not happen through the school system. It happens privately from your home, but that would be appropriate to put into your action plan. Or sometimes you may want to do outside assessments for your child. Maybe you want to get a private speech therapy, OT, PT, any services that you're receiving through the school. You can also request to have assessments completed outside of the school if you choose. And this would be an appropriate place to track all of the activities that you would like to coordinate outside of school. So you can just implement them into your outside of school action plan. Okay, so this is what you need to know about the IEP Breakdown Tool. We will go into this in much more depth as we progress through this class, but I just want to introduce to you all of the tools you'll need for the IEP breakdown process. So the next tool that you have is the instructions for using the IEP Breakdown Tool. And I believe it is helpful if you read through this process before you go through all of the virtual IEP breakdown classes. So this explains a great deal about IEP law or special education law, what is COMAR, what are federal regs, and it walks you through each step of the IEP process. So again, we will go through this in much more detail. It talks about all the different decisions you need to make as you work through the document: extended school year, transition, writing goals, accessing services, placement, and how they all build upon one another. So we'll talk, as we work through this process, we'll talk a lot about foundational strategies early in the IEP that we have to figure out, like, what is the diagnosis? How does it impact their ability to function? That is what drives goals. So there is definitely a lot of thought that goes into the sequencing of an IEP process, and you have to go through that process. So you can't come up with goals before you have a diagnosis, for example, or you can't determine placement without considering what their needs are. So the IEP is designed with all of that in mind, and we'll explain that as we go through the process again. So at the end of this document, there are quite a few references that we have provided to you. Next, I want to introduce the IEP Breakdown Interview. The reason I call this an interview is because when I first started this process, parents would often hand me their IEP and say that they weren't happy with their child's IEP, and they would hand it to me and then want me to understand what was not meeting their child's needs. So for me to understand that, I need to understand the needs of the child or the wishes of the parent. The parent knows the child better than anyone. So this is an opportunity for the parent to provide input on what are the unique needs, challenges, skills, aptitudes, or potentials that your child has, and where are the areas where they have extra need. So the more we understand about your child, the better we can design their IEP. So this is just an opportunity to get all of parent feedback on different areas. And in the back, I've just listed sort of like a tickler file of things for parents to consider. So they can ask themselves, does your child have challenges with social skills? How are their reading, writing, math skills, time management, self-management? Are you satisfied with the behaviors or their accommodations, modifications? Does the assistive technology that your child receives, does that meet their needs? How are their organizational skills? How are their transition services skills? So all of these are just suggestions to encourage parents to think about their child holistically and look at their strengths and needs so that we have a most comprehensive IEP. And when we think about designing an IEP, we want to be looking at academic skills, but equally important, we also want to be looking at functional skills and career readiness skills. So those are all important components, because when your child exits the school system, the idea is that they are most ready for independent living, career or job skills, or that they're pursuing continuing education, whether that's technical school, community college, four-year college, whatever it is, but that they have the skills they need to be successful in each of those settings. The next tool that parents need to gather is their child's IEP. And this is just a blank sample of a state-provided IEP. This is from the Maryland State Department of Education. And when I ask you to gather your IEP, I think it's most helpful if you have your current IEP and then one prior year IEP. And it's very important that as you go through the process that you compare the two IEPs, because you want to make sure that things do not get dropped from one year to the next. Sometimes they get overlooked. Maybe a goal has been advanced but not achieved, then that should stay in the child's IEP, or it should be advanced in the IEP, but sometimes it may get dropped by accident. So you want to make sure that all of the goals are being properly carried over, or all of the key information, areas affected by disability, everything that is important in one IEP should be carried over to the next. So you want to have 2 years of IEPs that you're gathering together and keeping in your binder for when we fully get started in the IEP process. Another tool that's very helpful to parents is the Parental Rights and the Maryland Procedural Safeguards Notice. This resource comes out usually about every 2 years, and this was most recently revised in March of 2019, so there should be a new one coming out shortly. There's a lot of very important information in this booklet, and this booklet is offered to parents. It should be offered at each IEP meeting. It's offered in paper copy or electronically, and it has a lot of very important information in it. So it talks about prior written notice, consent, surrogate parents, independent educational evaluations, confidentiality, discipline of students with disabilities, parental unilateral placement, transfer of parental rights at age of majority, how to handle disagreements, attorney's fees, and dispute resolution process. So there's a lot of great information in this, and if you have not taken the time to read it, I encourage all parents to read their procedural safeguards at least one time. And then finally, there is a one-page IEP Breakdown Takeaways page, and this is an opportunity for you as you are going through the IEP process. Maybe you're learning key lingo. There are a lot of acronyms in special ed law that you may need to learn. So if you're hearing about prior written notice or FAPE or IDEA, this is just an opportunity where you can write down these key terms. And one thing I encourage all parents to write down in their takeaways is If it is not written down, it did not happen. And what I mean by that is that parents need to learn to put everything in writing. So if they're asking for services, if they're asking for assessments, if they're asking for ESY services, transition services, whatever they're asking for their child, what should not happen is they should not ask their teacher while they see them in the hallway or while they're picking up their child, but instead get into the habit of requesting assessments or any other requests to always put them in writing. So once again, if it isn't in writing, it didn't occur. That would be step one of educational advocacy. Okay, so those are the key forms that you will need for IEP Breakdown as we begin the process next time. One more thing you're going to need to gather before we can truly begin in the IEP Breakdown process is you will need to gather 1 year's worth of quarterly progress and report cards for your child. So we can look at how they are progressing against their annual goals. So we'll get into that next time, but between now and then, if you can gather all of these materials, get them hole punched and put in your binder, you'll be ready to get started with our next class. Another thing you'll need to include in your IEP binder are annual assessments or any assessments that occurred inside of school or outside of school. Any assessments that are considered less than 3 years old are considered current assessments. So go through your paperwork and look for, it could be anything like speech and language, it could be OT, PT, oftentimes you'll get an educational or a psych eval. If they're less than 3 years old, you can include those. Also, if you have outside services, maybe you're seeing a private psychologist or a physician, maybe your child is receiving ABA therapy, any type of assessment that was done on the outside that would contribute significantly to your child's ability to function, their strengths, their needs, they can all be included and considered for acceptance into the IEP process. So if you have an outside school assessment, the school is not required to use it. However, they are required to consider using that tool. So if they decide that they will accept the assessment, they have to accept all of it. They do not get to pick and choose which parts of the assessments they will accept or deny. It's all or nothing, but they have the right to make that determination. The only other things I would add are it's very helpful if you can have a highlighter and a pen and maybe a tablet, so as you're taking notes you can just keep track of everything that you're going to be concerned with. So you'll have a lot of tools as you get started in this process, but all of this put together will help you to come up with what I believe would be your child's best IEP.